Welcome to Faith in Five with Cecil and Cecil. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we're so glad that you're here to fellowship with us. Welcome to Faith in Five with Cecil and Cecil, and this is episode 27. We're going to be talking about solitude and kind of having some alone time, and that can not be just being alone in a room, but also think about things like putting your phone down, or as Trinity term, digital detox. Actually spending some time with just yourself and no other distractions, and the benefits behind that, and maybe some examples of that we see in the Bible. And with that, I'm going to just read a really short verse, Luke chapter 5, verse 16. But then I'll ask you for some context about what's going on here and how we can apply that to our lives with the idea of solitude and with the idea of real solitude in mind. So Luke chapter 5 and verse 16, it's a short verse. It says, "But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray." So what's going on here, and maybe talk about that. I think there's probably multiple times that Jesus did something similar to this, probably more than what's written. So maybe give us some ideas about the context here, what's going on, and how we can apply it for ourselves for solitude.
Just before that statement is made about Jesus withdrawing, he has been in a healing ministry. And so crowds had shown up. People wanted to see a miracle. Some people wanted or needed a miracle. A lot of people just wanted to see a miracle or see a miracle worker. So crowds had come, and Jesus was then just constantly within a crowd, demands upon his time. Uh, and so this is when it's mentioned that there came a point where he just felt like he needed to get away from the crowds. So he would go off by himself and pray. So there had to be some withdrawal time, even in the ministry of Jesus, from the constant crowd noise.
So that's the context that's there. Health wise, just thinking about what it does for our spirit and our body, our mindset, to kind of take some alone time. I know, especially I've always felt sorry for people that I would call like either public servants or anybody that has a job that deals with kind of the general public, because you do have to deal with a lot of different types. You have to be understanding of a lot of different backgrounds, cultures, demands, needs, environments that are different than your own probably, and how to attend best to those different needs and backgrounds. So I know that stuff is exhausting to do. And I know in ministry that's tough to do, but there's lots of other examples. My wife's a nurse, and I know she sees a variety of people from the public and with different backgrounds and cultures. So there's, tons of, anybody in the service industry has to deal with this. So, what can we learn, or what can we do, and what can we expect from maybe applying this and giving ourselves some solitude? What is, I guess that's question one. Question two is what does solitude really look like?
Yep. Self-care is the expression of the day, where we used to talk more generally about taking some me time, and now it's about self-care. And so there is a recognition that sometimes we need to feed ourselves, feed our own souls, feed our own time. But I do want to mention this about Jesus. Jesus did withdraw and pray from time to time, but he wasn't doing self-care out of selfishness. The reason he was doing self-care is so he could get back out there and minister to the crowds. So we do recognize both the importance of taking care of ourselves, but we don't want to treat it in such a way as, well, then this is all about me. Jesus withdrew so that he could get out and minister. We want to so we want to balance those things.
Yeah, and I'll take that in kind of the same context, but also maybe from a different perspective. I think as parents, especially, maybe we feel like this some, but I know people, and I've felt this way, and I've seen people feel this way, where you don't give yourself the self-care because you feel guilty, because you feel like you are doing it for selfish reasons, and so then you aren't as productive and as efficient and do as good of a job taking care of other people because you haven't taken that time. So on the opposite end of that is it is not selfish to take the time that you need if you're doing it with the right mindset. Just have the right mindset and know that you do need this to help yourself perform your best. I think I do think that selfishness plays a big part in that for both reasons. People may do it too much, or for the wrong reasons, or what could be hindering some people from doing it when it would really help them in the long run. What do you think about that?
Yes. So Jesus Jesus said that he came to serve, but he also recognized, and we would put it here in these terms. The reason Luke mentions it, it was a real need that Jesus had to have some solitude time, some prayer time. We had an earlier podcast about spiritual disciplines. One of those is solitude. Jesus was taking care of himself so that he was better fit to take care of others.
I'll say one more thing, and then I'm going to kind of ask like maybe a little bit of a silly question. But one more thing I wanted to bring into this is, and I kind of touched on it with a question earlier. What does solitude really look like? And that does mean like probably not being on your phone, not sitting and watching TV, and or doom scrolling on your phone is the another popular term right now. But what do you think solitude really looks like? I mean, we did definitely talked about alone in the wilderness praying. Prayer, meditation. What are some of your thoughts on what does solitude actually look like?
Yep, I would discourage that screen time, but I wouldn't discourage open Bible time.
Yeah,
You know, there's a difference in those things, and then also prayer. Meditation is something I'm not super familiar with myself, but it was something that David was very familiar with, and in Psalm 1, when he talked about the person who grows and becomes strong like the tree that's by the river, that then can serve as a nesting place for the birds and shade for the animals and producer of fruit, then one of the things that he says we need to do is to meditate on his word night and day. So there's got to be some quiet, some meditation, so thinking real thoughts, but doing so away from the distractions of the world.
yeah, yeah. And I hear a lot of people say, and I think Emma and me sometimes say it, where kids nowadays don't know how to be bored. And I think what we're really saying is they don't know how to be in their own thoughts and have that solitude time because there is so many distractions out there. So very important for us all to have. I wanted to ask this question. Maybe it's kind of silly, but I think we see this a lot of times portrayed in movies, or maybe it's from movies we watch, we may even portray it this way in our minds. What do you think about what it really meant and took from Jesus to be a healer? Was there some exhaustion from the actual physical process of healing somebody and performing a miracle? Is there anything about that in the Bible, or what do you think about that?
The story that immediately comes to mind is the woman who touched Jesus' garment, and the report is Jesus felt power go out of him.
Yeah,
So and so, yeah, I think we can think of this practice of him withdrawing to pray. He was recharging
yeah,
because in his ministry, then he was letting out energy, and he needed to recharge to have energy to do that.
yep. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.